So move, Your Honor.
Second.
Second.
Motion second. Clerk will call the roll.
Yeager.
Aye.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
Agenda is approved. Next up then is the approval of the minutes from the April 1st meeting.
April Fools, huh?
Yeah.
Yes, we were.
I'll move for that one.
Second.
Was that you, Delane?
Nope,
Or
that was Michael.
Okay.
Any discussion on the minutes? Clerk will call the roll.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
Yeager.
Aye.
All right, next is consideration of the approval of the consent calendar. Any questions on the consent calendar tonight?
So move.
Second. That was Dan.
I think I heard you in there.
That's all right.
It's
Take
kind of a
Dan.
chorus.
Closer.
It was an illusion. He threw in
You
his
guys are
voice.
really messing with me tonight.
Clerk will call the roll.
Hammond.
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
Yeager.
Aye.
Friesman.
Aye.
Just in a hurry to get home.
Business of the mayor. I don't have too much. Steve and I,
Oh, good.
along with former Mayor Erb and Tim Fox from Area Development, went to the Rural Summit last week down in Grinnell, and thought we had some really good sessions down there, touching on a lot of the, and Steve might mention too, but touching on a lot of the topics that we're talking about. How, like Steve said, housing, broadband, and childcare were three of the big issues, and it seems to be three of the big issues in Charles City too. So I think we got some ideas at the summit, maybe ways to proceed on some of those. Nobody has a silver bullet that's going to solve all the problems, but I think we did get some discussion on some different projects, particularly the 360 housing that we talked about. We had some meetings set up with a group from Des Moines, Jim Thompson being one, and a couple other people with him that we've had to cancel a couple different times just due to weather and other circumstances. But the one session was pretty much all about that, and so we learned some things. But then talking to Sue, who's one of the people that was with Jim, she says, yeah, we definitely need to come up and do some more talking, because it sounds like you guys maybe have some possibilities to, you know, proceed on this program. So we're going to try and get together with them and proceed it. And this is for market level housing. It's not low income housing. It's not high end housing. It's workforce. Yeah, workforce housing. So they're kind of looking in that middle range that most, you know, we all, like I said in my city notes going down there, you know, used to be everybody's looking for how can we get more jobs to town? Well, now we have jobs in town, and now we're looking for how can we house the people that are going to work at the jobs. So seems to be a statewide issue, but again, I think they did have some good proposals. And again, they didn't say this is the answer. They said this is one answer. So maybe it fits for you, maybe it doesn't, but I think it's worth looking into. I guess that's the only thing I can say. It was a good meeting to go to, and Steve might follow up with more of his comments. He was on one of the panels that I didn't go to because I figured I knew everything Steve had to say. So I think I went to the broadband one at the same time.
Yeah, I
So
was on the housing panel.
You didn't go heckle him?
I didn't go heckle him, but
Tim tried. He couldn't find me, though.
yeah, Tim just got to the locked door, didn't he?
They need to work on the wayfinding for this. It was in the bottom basement of a church.
Yeah.
So
Oh, my.
All right.
Were you comfortable there?
I was, but Tim couldn't get inside the door, so I don't know what that means.
That was by design.
All right, moving on to consideration of Resolution 4019, approving award and contract and bond for the 2019 South Main Sidewalk Extension Project. Discussion, John?
Okay, yeah, on the action for tonight is to award the bid for the South Main Street Sidewalk Extension Project. The public hearing on this project we held at the last council meeting on April 1st, but at that meeting we didn't take any action on the bids. The four bids that we received: King Construction, they submitted the low bid, $59,273. Larry Elwood Construction, they submitted a bid of $63,300. DeBose Concrete out of Charles City, $75,718. Wicks Construction, they submitted a bid of $121,240. Now the engineer's cost opinion on the project is $67,000. Now that's for the what's the base bid, which is basically the sidewalk extension from 9th down to 13th Street on the west side of South Main. We also had 2 ad alternate bids. The first ad alternate bid was for a mid-block crosswalk there at the theater site. And the alternate B was for modifications to First Avenue, there 800 First Avenue, to take care of stormwater issues that affect both 800 First Avenue as well as 1801 Rolfing Street. After discussing this at the last planning session, what we've done, we've prepared a resolution that will award the base bid as well as add alternate B, which is the work there on First Avenue. And that total bid package is $68,040. So we would recommend approval of Resolution 40-19, awarding the bid to King Construction.
Any questions, discussion?
What's the funding source for this, John? How's it going to get paid for?
The funding source for the South Main sidewalk portion, we budgeted that out of local option sales tax. The ad alternate B is stormwater project, so that part of it we'd probably do out of the stormwater fund.
So we're not addressing alternate A?
That's correct.
I would so move for Resolution 40-19.
Second.
Any further questions or discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Malero.
Aye.
Yeager.
Aye.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
Motion approved to award the bid for this project and add the one add-on, so. Next is consideration of the third and the final reading of Ordinance 1129 about tree trimming.
Yes, third and final on tree trimming, sounds good. This is this amendment right here, which is what will change city code that will allow abutting property owners to trim trees that are in the right-of-way out in front of their house. So one of the discussion topics we had throughout the tree trimming discussion was, yes, we require people to, we make it their duty to trim the trees, but we don't allow them to do it. They would have to, they'd have to hire a licensed contractor to come and do it. So this actually allows them to trim the trees out in front of their own property, which are city trees in the right-of-way, if they so choose. It goes on to say that, while yes, they do it, it is done under city supervision, so we do have some oversight with that. But the large and short of it is basically allowing that duty to trim.
Any questions or discussion?
I mean, I guess I will add too, they'll be able to trim it. It's always been their responsibility to trim it. And so that'll continue to be the case moving forward. And so this just allows them to do the work themselves. That being said, if a tree is too large or could present a danger, we do ask that people try and, just address each situation. If it's beyond your means to trim it, we certainly recommend you hiring a licensed contractor to do it.
Yeah, we've kicked this one around quite a bit. I'd move for ordinance 1129.
Second.
Any other questions? The clerk will call the roll.
Yeager.
Aye.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
So we will then have the third reading of Ordinance 1129.
Ordinance 1129, ordinance amending section 124.03, exceptions, section 124.06, workmanship, and section 151.03, duty to trim trees of the Charles City Code of Ordinance for the purpose of requiring private property owners to trim trees on publicly owned property or right-of-way abutting the owner's private property.
Thank you. And do we have a motion to adopt and publish Ordinance 1129?
So move.
Second.
Further discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
Yeager.
Aye.
So we will publish that ordinance. They'd be also, I think, good to make sure we kind of put on our schedule to do a regular what's the word I'm looking for? Survey of this, of the community, so that we don't end up with 2,800 trees to be done all in 1 year. So maybe just do this on a quarter of the city every year, just to kind of go out and inspect, I guess is the word I was looking for, so that we can inform property owners that yes, your tree needs to be trimmed, and kind of stay on top of it a little bit more.
I agree.
Sounds like a good idea.
All right. Moving on then to consider Resolution 4819, which is approving the lease for land at the water PC plant.
WRF,
Huh?
the WRRF, or soon to be the
Word.
WRF.
That's why I didn't, yeah, it was,
Currently known as WPC, Water Pollution Control Plant. Yes, historically, we've rented farm ground out there to Terry Wagner. It's ground adjacent to the city plant, and we canceled that lease last fall with not knowing where we would be at with the construction progress for the new plant. And so here we are this spring. The plant project has been delayed a little bit. We'll be bidding it out later this summer. But in the meantime, we now have an understanding of what area is going to be available for potential lease. And so what we'd like to do is enter into a 1-year lease agreement with Terry Wagner. As you can see in your packet there, I've kind of measured out or marked off what the area is. It's almost 7.5 acres, not quite, of some irregular shaped land out there that we would look to lease to Terry. Terry and I met last week before our workshop, and then again this morning following our discussion from our council workshop, and he was agreeable to the prorated amount. Right now he's paying $1,700. He was paying $1,710 for the full 13 acres. Now we have 7.4 acres. Just to be sure, I rounded that down to 7, and we prorated the amount, and so that comes up to $920 lease. And Terry is amenable to that. I did give Terry a copy of this current lease with the addendum that Brad put in to just cover kind of some of the provisions we talked about at our workshop. Whether just in case if we find ourselves where we have to go in and utilize some of the ground that he's at for part of the construction progress, that we're able to compensate him for loss, crop loss and all those type of things. And I think that Brad addressed all those questions in there appropriately in that addendum, and Terry was accepting of that. So he actually signed that lease this morning. So I told him, depending on council approval tonight, we will have that available to him fairly soon with council approval. So with that, I recommend council approve the resolution.
I'd so move.
4819.
Second.
any other questions or comments? Clerk will call the roll.
Hammond,
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
Yeager,
Aye.
Friesman.
Aye.
All right, we'll sign that lease. Next is consider Resolution 4919, approving the pole-mounted antenna policy. Discussion on this one. This is
Yeah.
a quick, came up for,
This one came up pretty quick. Yeah, this was actually, Mayor and I both saw this on the same webinar in regard to 5G deployment and what that means for communities. And 5G antenna deployment is basically that next generation for cellular service. And currently what you see right now is pole-mounted antennas mounted on water towers, structures that are tall to reach and make that coverage. Well, 5G is a little bit different. They're using a different bandwidth to be able to get those higher speeds. And so to get those higher speeds, they're using a bandwidth that requires more antennas. So you'd need, what they're saying is an antenna about every 500 feet, or a little bit more than a city block. So the FCC had made a ruling to help facilitate this 5G deployment, and so they're making it available to companies that want to come in and mount their antennas on publicly owned structures. And so what this discussion arose out of, well, you know, are there preferred areas where cities would prefer not to have these placed on their structures? And, you know, some of the things came to mind were like, you know, park areas, school areas, or decorative poles, you know, as they come through the downtown. So we have until April 15th of 2019 to consider adopting a policy that looks just to address those concerns. And so Charles City, along with a number of other communities in the state of Iowa, I know are working towards adopting a policy to help address this, knowing that this could change as we move forward, but at least to have a base plan in place. And so what you see before you is a resolution that would approve our recently developed plan and design guidelines. And it's basically a document that Brad put together based on information we got from the city of Coralville and the city of Center Point. And so we use both of those to put this together to kind of direct how we would like to see this moving forward when 5G deployment, you know, comes to Charles City, whenever that may be. So what we have here is a basic plan that, you know, ranks our you know, our areas of preference of you know, where they could go, and so at the end it also, you know, includes some photos and designs of kind of what the structures are we're talking about. And so with that, we recommend to the council that you consider approval of these guidelines through resolution 4919.
Well, we don't need to rush into anything. We got another 5 hours and 40 minutes to think about it. But I know you've had, and this is a standard work through, so I'd move to go ahead with it.
I'd second. Brad, did you have anything else to add since you kind of put it together? As far as-
Just what we talked about a little bit at the planning session, and Steve alluded to it, is that we wanted to get something in place for the 15th, and it may be something we have to revisit at a future date. But a lot of the cities were kind of pulling from the same document, so a lot of the cities have pretty similar policies in place. But I don't think I have anything to add other than what we talked about at the planning session.
And I don't know if I'm correct or not, but the 5G is mostly for cell phone usage. Is that kind of what it's designed for, as opposed to other usages?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that's its primary focus, and it's designed to have higher capacities, higher speeds. And side note, I mean, that's been part of the discussion throughout the broadband thing that we've had is, what about the advent of 5G? And, you know, the discussion on 5G is, you know, that would be the next generation of cell phone, but it's still going to need a fiber backbone to service that. So, but yeah, I think most of it would be for cell phone. I mean, I guess there wouldn't be a reason why it couldn't be used for, you know, other desktop or laptop uses, whether it be, you know, in those open areas or in buildings. I know that's one of the challenges I think right now with that technology is because of the bandwidth they're using, it doesn't penetrate buildings very well. So that could be a challenge there. But with that challenge, you could tie some type of wireless thing or some Wi-Fi that feeds off of that. So, but yeah, I think it's largely for cell phone, but cell phones are with us everywhere. And
Yeah, well, I just kind of want, you know, because we've been talking a lot about the municipal broadband. I just wanted, this is not a replacement for that initiative that we're going through. This would actually, just like you say, use the fiber optics. So just so people don't think, oh, well, why don't we just do this instead of doing the broadband? They're two different entities.
yes, yep. This could be actually something that helps supplement the
Yeah.
operation of the
Yeah.
fiber.
Okay, any other questions or comments? A motion? We do have a motion.
Second.
Call the roll.
And we did the...
Second.
Yeah, okay, yeah. We ready?
Yep.
Malero.
Aye.
Yeager.
Aye.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
All right, so we approved 4919, and we'll move on then to Resolution 5019, which is adopting changes to the federal procurement policies. I had an easier time saying procurement tonight than I did the other night.
Did a good job, though.
Discussion here.
I can handle this one.
All right.
Right down here. This is in response to an email I received from a gal down at the Department of Homeland Security here in Iowa. This is going to need to be in place if we ever have to access any FEMA funding due to flooding or some other disaster. And she's been working her way through the state trying to make sure all the cities and counties are up to date with their policies. So she sent out some sample policies. This is not going to affect any other policies we might have in place, such as Heidi has a federal procurement, it's kind of hard to say, policy that she has to follow as well. So this is just going to apply to FEMA fund if we ever need to access them. So we just need to adopt these and get them sent down to her so she can check us off her list. So it also includes an anti-fraud, conflict of interest and an anti-fraud policy, I think was the title of the other one. But there's 3 different policies included in this, so they're all lumped together.
Were there major changes from the old policy, Trudy?
You know, I never came across an old one just specifically for FEMA. The only one I came across was Heidi's and then our procurement policy. So.
Any other questions?
I'd so move.
Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Yeager.
Aye.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
Next is Resolution 5119, approving the Title VI non-discrimination agreement with the Iowa Department of Transportation. Is this you also, Trudy?
No.
This is not you. This is
No.
John. Oh.
Oh.
Well,
Kind
when,
of sound like the same kind of stuff, so.
Thank
Yeah.
goodness it's not.
when federal funds come into the state, the Iowa DOT, for federal funds for road building, the Iowa DOT is actually considered the recipient. And the cities are considered sub-recipients, so the DOT is really the entity that responsible for making sure that all the federal laws are being abided by. And some of those laws are all the anti-discrimination laws. So the Iowa DOT has prepared a non-discrimination agreement and a non-discrimination assurance that have to be adopted by the cities. Now, the last time Charles City did this, it was in 2012. And just recently when the DOT was starting to prepare funding agreements for the Charlie Western Trail Bridge, they said, I was notified, it was 7 years old, we have a change in mayor, and that we need to update our Title VI agreement. So I've kept everything the same, just like what we did in 2012. And one of the things the city has to do is name a Title VI coordinator. In 2012, I was named as the coordinator. I kept that the same. So to approve the agreement and the assurance document, I'd recommend approval of Resolution 112-12.
A change in mayor, is there something there we should know about?
We haven't had one in a while.
They found out.
Yeah.
I so move.
Second.
Any further discussions? Clerk will call the roll.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
Yeager.
Aye.
Any of you guys out there wanting real fun reading, just grab some of this stuff
Yeah.
and read through it.
I think these last 2 would qualify for
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll put you to sleep.
Uh,
It's ridiculous.
All right, so next is Resolution 5219, which is approving the preliminary plans and specs and setting the date for the public hearing for the Public Housing Transformer Project. Heidi?
I'm Heidi Nielsen, the city's housing director. As the mayor said, we are requesting approval of the preliminary plans for an electrical update project at South Cedar Terrace. We've been working with Scott and Anderson Architects with preparing the specifications, and we will retain them for the project management also. We have an electrical engineer assisting them with the design from Resource Consulting Engineers. The project involves replacing the 3 existing transformers and replacing them with 4 new transformers, and then they'll run secondary feeders to each of the buildings and to the security lights. We're also requesting an alternate bid for replacement of the security lights. The bid documents will be issued on April 18th, and the notice will be posted that day, which is Thursday of this week. The pre-bid meeting is on April 25th at 2 o'clock for all interested contractors. The bids are due by 2 o'clock on Monday, May 14th, and at that time, the City Council will have the bids to review at a planning session on May 15th, and the Housing Board will review them on the 16th and make a recommendation to the Council for approval. The public hearing is on May 20th with the acceptance of the final plans and award of a contract. Following the hearing, we're anticipating a completion date of around August 30th, and we're going to be paying for this project out of our operating reserves.
Questions for Heidi?
Do you have an estimate yet on the cost, Heidi?
Just what Ed said the other day, you know, anywhere from $330,000 to $370,000.
Okay.
We're hoping $330,000.
Yeah. We all hear that, but nobody else that doesn't come to the meeting knows it, so thank you for repeating it.
Any further discussion? Questions?
I'd so move.
Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Hammond.
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
Yeager.
Aye.
Friesman.
Aye,
Thank you.
because it
Heidi.
sounds like we're on borrowed time if something goes wrong with one of these, so
Yes, definitely.
the sooner we get it done, the better.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi.
All right, next is Resolution 5319, approving the quote for the Water Department Clearwell Washing and Painting Project.
Yes, so in this fiscal year 19, we budgeted $33,000 to have the clear well and the line and sludge tank pressure washed, seals cracked, and painted. And so Corey obtained some quotes from 2 different vendors to do that work. One of them's from K&W Coatings, the other is from Central Tank Coatings. And as we talked about at the budget workshop, at the planning session workshop, there was a bit of a discrepancy in as far as the amount of thickness. And so one of them was quoting doing the project for a prime coat and a finish coat, each that would be 2 to 3 mils thick. So for a total of 4 to 6. Whereas the other entity was quoting the same exact materials, same number of coats, being 2, except it would be 4 to 6 mils per coat. And so our initial thought was, well, you know, for the additional $4,700, it might be worthwhile to get the thicker paint and go that direction. So it was mentioned at the workshop, you know, about, you know, does thicker mean better? And so we looked into that further and found that in reaching out to the Tnemec rep for that paint, they said actually putting on the thicker layers might cause bubbling and for it not to adhere. So in general, the additional thickness was not a benefit. And so with that, we reached out to Central Tank Coatings and asked them about that, and they said they actually had a discrepancy on their bid. They realized that where they said 4 to 6 mils per coat should have been 2 to 3 mils per coat for 2 coats, a total thickness of 4 to 6. So that's what I'm trying to say is they did intend to bid the same thing. So our recommendation from the workshop of going with Central Tank for the additional amount for the added thickness has then been changed to, well, if all things are being equal, K&W Coatings, who had the total not to exceed of $21,000, is who we recommend for the work. So it's certainly worth looking into further.
Questions or comments?
I assume the funds to pay for this comes out of the water
That would be correct.
fund, so
Mhm.
I'd so move.
Second.
Is that a second and
Yes.
came that way? I just heard the
It is.
aye part.
He's a terrible
I just heard a grumble.
I was reading.
Any further discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Malero.
Aye.
Yeager.
Aye.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll proceed along those lines. Next is Resolution 5419, which is approving the replacement of the traffic signal control box at the Gilbert and Main Street intersection.
Yeah, so,
discussion?
so the control box at Gilbert and Main Street has been recently giving us more and more issues. You know, you may have noticed that it does tend to blink yellow more often than it has in the past. And we budgeted funding this year, I think we're at about 15,000, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have that number in front of me right now. To replace the traffic control box on North Grand at the intersection of 4th Avenue and North Grand there by Casey's. That's when we budgeted and we're planning to replace. That one does need to be replaced as well. But given the upcoming project that's going to be happening there with the redo of the intersection and that Highway 18 work with the state, that'll be happening here in a couple years, that we thought that would be the best time to replace that equipment and get that changed around. So in the meantime, that money we did budget, we would like to apply towards this Gilbert and Main Street location. And we got 3 quotes, the low being for $17,835 from General Traffic Control, and that would replace the components there with new upgraded equipment. It would be fiber ready for if and when we have fiber to run to that area. We could also look to upgrade it with a camera, and the camera would be for signaling the light, not for anything else, but for helping cycle the lights through, because currently right now it works on a timer. And so if we did want to upgrade to a camera to detect traffic flow, we could do it then. But as we found out at the workshop, that adds about another 15 grand to the price tag. So for right now, we recommend the $17,835 from General Traffic Control. And this would be paid out of road use tax.
The box is going to be pretty much located in the same location as the present one?
I would suspect the exact same location.
Okay. Just basically replace the insides and all that good stuff. Second.
Any further questions or comments? Clerk will call the roll.
Yeager.
Aye.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
All right, so we'll get moving on that project. Next is Resolution 5519, approving the agreement to acquire some property.
Yes, so we've had some discussions with Allied Land Development, and what's being discussed is Outlot C. It's the remaining 8-acre lot that's in the Allied subdivision that's currently undeveloped. It was going to be potentially that final developed area of the Allied subdivision. And so as you can see on your map there, it kind of shows the shape. It almost looks like the United States to a certain degree. What Allied Land Development, for the most part, its ownership is down to one person. They no longer live in the area. They're looking to essentially retire, kind of get out of it. They still own this property. It's still developable property. It might not be as desirable as some of the other places, but it's developable nonetheless. And part of that is we have Pheasant Ridge Court. Pheasant Ridge Court is a short street that currently only services one house, and that has there's a performance bond that the city's holding with Allied for them to complete and finish that cul-de-sac. Currently, with one house, there's no need to have the cul-de-sac, but if and when it gets developed, there would be need for a cul-de-sac. So by acquiring this property, Allied would be willing to give us the 8 acres in exchange for not requiring them to fulfill that performance bond on the cul-de-sac, which is probably about a $70,000 to $80,000 cost to put that in. And so, since we really don't need it at this time, we could take over that property. If the city looks to develop it or do whatever, we could add that cul-de-sac at a later date. But I think we would be well served by acquiring that land for release of that performance bond. And so with that, we would recommend Resolution 5519 to acquire real estate.
Any discussion?
As we talked at the workshop the other night, there really is no downside to doing this from what any of us could see. It just seems like a good deal for the city to kind of control that piece of property and have it available. And Allied has done a very good job. I mean, as far as the valuation out there, all the properties they've built has far exceeded the requirements of the development agreement, from what I recall anyway of our conversation, so.
It's been a very good partnership.
Right, right.
Allied, or Gary Veeder has reviewed the offer with, he's working with Hank Parson, and they were fine with the
Fine with
agreement.
I'd so move.
Second.
Who owns the property north of that? Is that the school, or?
Yes, the school does. And they do have some interest in possibly, reshaping Comet Drive there. And so that will be something that will probably be asked about on the city side. So part of the back area there up on top of the ridge, which really wouldn't come into play with those properties, we'll likely see a request from the school to obtain some of that. And so I think that's something we should seriously consider and be open to.
Any further discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Friesman.
Aye.
Hammond.
Aye.
Malero.
Aye.
Yeager.
Resolution approved, and we now own some more property, huh?
It's a buyer's market.
We're getting richer every day.
There'll be a couple of steps we'll take before we'll actually get it.
Okay. So I was premature on my declaration there, huh?
But assuming no issues pop up.
All right, good.
A little too excited.
All right, next we'll go to miscellaneous correspondence.
None, Your Honor.
How about any other reports, Brad?
None, Your Honor.
City clerk report.
The next meeting will be on April 22nd. We will have a special meeting followed by the planning session. The special meeting, we need to cover a couple of resolutions that Mark Wick sent over Friday afternoon late that couldn't make it to this meeting. So it should be short and sweet. At least I think that's all we're going to be doing, right, Steve, on the special meeting?
Yeah,
Just those two resolutions?
Resolution of support for Great Places designation and resolution of support for the other one.
Culture and
Culture and
entertainment.
entertainment.
Culture and entertainment, that's what it was. Yes.
Very good.
Good thing we have backup here.
What's that?
It's a good thing we have backup here.
Yeah, well, I need backup all the time, so I'm glad I could provide backup once at least, so. Anything else, Steve, for the city administrator's report?
Yeah, just to follow up, touch base, as Mayor talked about, we went to the Iowa Rural Summit in Grinnell this last week, and it was a very good summit. Rural communities, so basically, communities, 10,000 and under, getting together to share ideas and how to, address issues. And if there was one thing repeated, it was fiber, housing, childcare. And I think in that order. I mean, everybody realizes the need for fiber. It's just going about how to do it and how to get it done. Housing was a big piece. The Housing 360 session that we sat in is basically a way for communities to partner with a private developer and a local realtor and a local business that will provide a pre-qualified buyer and build a workforce, level housing. And this contractor that the state is working with, they have right now I think 6 or 7 different styles and price points in the prefab homes that could come in. So that's something that we could look at, see if it could be worth working into our plan. But yeah, overall some really good sessions. We actually saw a practice in place that we got some pictures of maybe how to address our mid-block crosswalk that we saw in action there, so that'll be interesting to take a look at that. So yeah, very good summit and very worth the time. Another thing I just wanted to mention again is about House Study Bill 165. That's gaining a lot of attention of cities across and counties across the state. Because the main parts of this proposed legislation would put a 2% growth cap on cities. So we would basically whatever the levy rate is based on the valuations. If you have new valuations that come on, that gets added in, and then if you need to go 2% beyond that, the council would have to pass a resolution subject to reverse referendum. And it might go to election if you need to raise, taxes. And it would include the 810 and any non-voted levy, including employee benefits, and all those type of things, which, as you well know, often fluctuate more than 2% a year. Sometimes with like the 411, we've seen 25, 30% increases in a year. So there's a lot of concern among the cities that this is a little overreaching by the state, and that they should allow local cities to have local control. And so we're helping to encourage that. So, you know, I've asked the league to kind of do a little bit more study on that, and they actually used Charles City as an example over the last 4 years that they sent me. And 3 out of those, actually 5 years, 3 out of those 5 years, we were well over that 2%. And I can't think of too many things that we were, you know, too far reaching on. You know, there's transit, there's ambulance, there's all those things that we're now having to fund and you know, and pay for, and to cap that. And, you know, that doesn't even speak to the backfill. Who knows what's going to happen with the backfill? So it's very concerning to communities. And so House Bill 165, talk to your legislators. It's in the House right now. It sounds like the Senate is working on a companion bill, but nobody's seen that yet. So this is something that it's fall-proof, so it could come back and at any time. So certainly a deep concern. Broadband Commission, we did meet this afternoon. They're at the point now where they're discussing site locations, and so we're going to be visiting a few here over the next week or so. As far as getting from the consultants, we're waiting on the completion of the business plan. The business plan cannot be completed until we have a site. So it's really a chicken or the egg thing here. And so after much discussion at the last meeting and our meeting today, they recommended that we look to, as far as the location, and just use 105 Milwaukee Mall, your City Hall, as the location for the utility. And so, if and when we find a different place where this should go, and assuming we go forward with the project, we can redo the plan to extent to include that change. It'd be about a $12,000 cost to change that, but until we know, we just felt that that's the best way forward, because any other locations we can't nail down and have ready for the business plan. And we need to have the business plan to know how this is going to work, how we're going to fund it, and all that stuff. So, Park and Rec Director applications, those were due on last Friday. I've gotten about 45 of them.
Wow,
and
nice.
So I've started going through them here this morning, and then we'll continue to do that the rest of this week. Hopefully by next week we'll be setting up some interviews, and I have a Park and Rec board member that's offered to serve on that, and a former Park and Rec board member that offered to serve on that interview committee along with Ginny and I. So that, and I guess the last thing I just wanted to mention is, you may have noticed we didn't have the 401 North Main window project on the agenda for tonight. We actually did not receive any bids on that project last week. We did have one that expressed interest, but they could not get a bid bond in place. So we're going to look to move forward with that, going forward without a bid bond, because that just basically secures that the bond will be, the bid will be followed through on, and since we didn't have any, we'll look to work with a quote with that particular vendor. So John will have more on that at our next workshop, and but yeah, we didn't get any bids on that project, unfortunately. So that's all I have.
Speaking of the House bill, the governor was at one of our sessions, and she told us how it's great to have all these great local leaders and local projects going on. And so afterwards, she kind of hung around for a while, so I went up and said I'm the mayor of Charles City, which I thought was just kind of nice to get Charles City on her agenda. But told her how you told us how we have these great leaders, and now you want to take the options away from us because the state thinks they have better ideas than we do. And I don't know if she was very receptive to my comments, but on the other hand, I did have actually a kind of a nice conversation for 3 or 4 minutes with her, and it wasn't like she wasn't listening. I think I got my point across, and like I say, whether she agrees or not, I don't know, but I did think it was nice just to kind of put that seed in there a little bit.
Was it like pulling teeth?
Mm-hmm.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't actually. So it's kind of, like I say, it's just always nice when you can put Charles City in the governor's mind. That's a good thing usually. So, any board, commission, or committee reports?
Ambulance Commission met this afternoon. We are making some good progress on that.
We are.
And I don't know, Steve, if you want to talk to that at all or not. I was going to
Yeah, actually, we met today with the ambulance commission, which consists of the city, the hospital, and the county, and, you know, we had a draft contract with AMR that included, you know, basically things that we'd all talked about before. You know, the elimination of their requirement to pay the city and the county for services. You know, right now, they paid us for dispatching, which was ultimately paid to the county, and then they paid us for use of the firemen responding to the calls, which are the drivers, and they paid for rent of the fire department facility, and so that equaled about $25,000. They wanted to remove that, and they wanted then also be paid $128,000. So a big swing in how the whole paradigm of this works, and obviously very. You know, there was, you know, we were able to put, you know, $50,000 together as a city to fund this. And this agreement has been an agreement between the city and St. Charles Township, and, you know, and then, you know, the hospital and the county had some interest in maybe doing some additional things, but, you know, in an effort to just to try and, you know, keep what we have, you know, we've come up with a potential agreement that that could work, and so we'll be looking to move forward with that. Given that $50,000 that the city can put in, and given the level of staffing, which will be kept the same, there will be some increase in the pricing for the calls, which is, you know, the X factor there. So those will be going up some. And so I hope to have Mark Corley come to an upcoming workshop just to kind of review it with the city council, because it's basically, you know, the city is the funding source, and it's agreement between the city and the township. So that's what we'll be looking to renew, and good discussion today, and, you know, still, I think as this goes forward, we'll have more to talk about the long-term solution for this, because, you know, aggregating ambulance calls is what's going to help save this thing. It's just rural communities, it's so hard to provide that service, and volunteerism is not what it used to be, and so a lot of communities are struggling with that, and we're no exception.
I was just going to add on to the broadband deal that we're really fast approaching the point where we're probably going to have to look at putting the utility board in place, because as this project, if it does move forward, the council's going to have to decide if, you know, we're going to keep proceeding forward, and if we are, then that board is going to have to be put in place, because that board is the entity that actually has to, you know, purchase a site or rent a site or whatever, and start entering into all the contracts and the funding and everything like that, because it won't be the city or the broadband commission. It would be the new utility board. So
That's correct.
there's a lot of decisions to be made here in relatively short order if we are going to proceed to move forward.
And I'm just going back to the ambulance commission. I think, you know, it was the opinion of everybody at the meeting today that we really do have a good system, and just how can we afford to, or what's the mechanism to afford to keep the system that we have, I guess. So, all right. Any other reports? Have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
No, that's on the 22nd. Sorry, I'll talk to you afterwards.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Checks there?
Farmers Trust and Savings. I would title
I'm
that.
going home. I don't know about you.
They're from 1921.